All right, welcome back. We are doing part 2 of 4 polynomials and their graphs. So in the first video, we looked at how to find the end behavior. So now we're going to take a look at how to find the zeros, because I had said up here, graphing polynomials, we need to determine the end behavior, and then we need to determine the zeros of the polynomial. So that's what this video is going to focus on. How do we find the zeros of the polynomial? And the zeros, again, are just the x-intercepts. And you've worked with x-intercepts before. That's whenever you let the y be 0 and you solve for x. Okay, so take notes. All right, finding zeros. All right, so these are the x-intercepts. All right, so we let y equals 0 and we solve for x. It's always the same. That starting position is always let y be 0. The solving part, however, is the part that always changes. And so I think a lot of students think finding x-intercepts is different all the time. Okay, so solve for x. Okay, but this initial move, let's start by letting y be 0. That's always true for x-intercepts. How you solve for x is another story. It depends on what you have. All right. So, different ways to solve for x. Maybe you're going to be factoring trinomials. So, factoring trinomials. We did a lot of that. Maybe you're going to use quadratic formula. Okay. Or maybe you're using factoring by grouping. So these are going to be the methods we'll be focusing on. There are other methods, synthetic division and whatnot, but we won't be doing those. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at this example. Find the zeros. Again, I'm only going to write it once, and we'll do A, B, C. All right, find the zeros. So let's find the zeros of this first polynomial. Suppose that we have this. P of x equals x cubed minus 2x squared minus 3x. Okay, so we let y, and remember the f of x, p of x, g of x, h of x, that used to be our good friend y. Okay, so I'm going to put 0 there. And then now I'm going to go ahead and try to solve for x. All right, so this is where all of your factoring techniques come in handy. So I noticed that they all have x in common. So I'm going to go ahead and factor out an x first. And I will be left with x squared minus 2x minus 3. All right, good. And then now here I have a quadratic trinomial. So I'm going to go ahead and factor that using this method. If it's not factorable, then we can use quadratic formula. All right, so 3 here and 1 here. That will give me negative 2x for the middle term, so that is correct. Excellent. Okay, so then now I can solve this. So from here, x equals 0. This one, x plus 1 equals 0. And this one here, x minus 3 equals 0. This one's already solved. This one, I can subtract 1. So x equals negative 1. And over here, I can add 3. So x equals 3. So those are my 3 zeros. Okay, and what's going to happen is you're going to plot these zeros. So x equals 0, x equals -1, and x equals 3. So you would be plotting your 3 zeros here, okay? And then you do your end behavior, but we'll do that in the next video. Okay, let's take a look at this next one. Suppose that you have this polynomial, x squared plus x minus 6. Okay, so we're going to let y be 0. This one's kind of an easy one. This is just a quadratic trinomial. So we're going to go ahead and try to factor this. X times x to make x squared. Positive and negative to make -6. You can try 1 and 6, or 3 and 2. Looks like it's 3 here and 2 here. That will give me +1 for the middle. Good. So then x plus 3 equals 0. X minus 2 equals 0. And now I can solve each one. Subtract 3, both sides. So x equals -3. Add 2 to both sides. So x equals +2. All right. And again, you would take your zeros. 1, 2, 3. You have a 0 at -3. And you have one at +2. Okay? So knowing where these zeros are will help you figure out the rest of your graph. Okay? Let's take a look at another one. Okay, suppose you have this polynomial, p of x equals x plus 2 times x minus 1 times x minus 3. Okay, so we let y be 0. And this is nice because it's already factored for us, so we don't have to do much work. All we have to do is take each factor and set it equal to 0, and then solve. Subtract 2 on both sides, so x equals -2. Add 1 to both sides, so x equals 1. And add 3 to both sides, so x equals 3. Okay, so that one wasn't too much work. So -2, we have one at 1, and we have one at 3. Okay? Excellent. And let's take a look at the next one. Suppose that I have this, p of x equals -2x to the 4th minus x cubed plus 3x squared. All right, let y be 0. And then I notice that they all have x squared in common. So I will factor out an x squared. You know what? I'm going to factor out a negative as well because I like my leading terms to be positive. Okay. So then that will give me 2x squared plus x and then minus 3. Okay. All right. And now I'm going to try to factor this quadratic trinomial. And again, if it doesn't factor, you can use quadratic formula. All right, 2x times 1x will give me 2x squared. I need to make -3. So negative, positive, and it looks like it'll be 1 there and 3 here. Okay, so it looks like this should be positive and this one should be negative. And that will give me, this combination will give me +1x for the middle, right? Because -2 plus 3 is +1. All right, good. All right, so we have negative x squared equals 0. 2x plus 3 equals 0. X minus 1 equals 0. All right, so here x equals 0. Now, this one over here is special. We call this one a double zero because x equals 0 happens twice. I just don't write it twice. It's like x equals 0, x equals 0. I don't have to write it twice because I know that it'll land in the same spot. Okay, and the reason why is because of this degree 2. Okay, so because of that, x equals 0 is a solution 2 times. Okay, we call it a double zero or multiplicity 2. And this becomes important when you're graphing because when one of these is a double zero, then the behavior of the graph at that intercept has a certain behavior. And we'll talk about that in the next video. Okay. All right. And then over here, subtract 3. 2x equals negative 3. Divide by 2. So x equals negative 1.5. Add 1. So x equals 1. Okay. So again, you would still have these zeros. You would have one at 0. That one, the special one. When it's special, I like to give it some sparkle. Okay. Negative 1.5 right there. And positive 1 right there. Okay. All right. Let's try one more. I think it's one more. Let's see. Yeah. And then we'll do graphing. Okay. All right. So let's suppose we have this polynomial. P of x equals x cubed minus 2x squared minus 4x plus 8. All right. So we let y be 0. And for this one, they don't have anything in common, so we can't factor anything out. This is not a quadratic trinomial, so we can't do that cute little factoring that we do. All right. But we do notice that we have 4 terms. And when we have 4 terms, that's usually, not always, but usually a sign of factoring by grouping. Okay, so we break it up into 2 groups. Okay, so I start with this group and I do my common factoring here because they have something in common. So they have x squared in common, so I can factor that out. This is my second group. They have something in common. They have negative 4 in common, so I could factor that out. So that's what you're going to be doing here. 4 terms. Try factoring by grouping. Okay. All right, so here I'm going to factor out x squared from this first group, and that will leave me with x minus 2. All right, we're done with that. Now let's go to the next group. This group has negative 4 in common, so I'm going to factor out negative 4. Negative 4 times 1x, negative 4 times negative 2. Okay? All right, good. And if you do this correctly, then inside the parentheses should match x minus 2. So now I'm going to factor out the x minus 2, and I'll have x squared minus 4 left. But I recognize x squared minus 4 as the difference of 2 squares. So that's going to factor out as x plus 2, x minus 2. So we have here x minus 2 equals 0, x plus 2 equals 0, x minus 2 equals 0. So add 2, x equals 2 minus 2, x equals negative 2, and then over here, x equals 2. Aha, but here it is again. Right there, we have a double 0. We see that x equals 2 is a 0 twice. Okay, so when we do our graph, x equals 2 is a double 0. So we'll give it some sparkle there. And x equals negative 2. Okay, so that's how you find your zeros. Just be familiar with all the different factoring techniques. If you're pretty strong with your factoring, then you should be okay with finding the zeros. Okay. All right. So we looked at how to find the end behavior. We looked at how to find the zeros. So now in the next video, we're going to go ahead and put it together, and we're going to look at how to graph. And then in the last video, we're going to look at, okay, well, what do you do when you have a double 0? Okay, so that's going to be in the last video, not in the next one. Okay, if you have questions, make sure you text me or email me.